You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music can mean but one thing. It is time once again for the bi-weekly options extravaganza known as the Option Block, what the cool kids call the old OB. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so, Options Insider Radio Network. A slew of content hitting you this week on the old network. A lot of great live stuff out there, including some great pro Q&As coming up tomorrow, options oddities, how do you get all that live stuff, and, of course, the Q&As and everything else. You got to head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro to begin your journey to the dark side. Then you can join the secret club and hang out with some cool folks, ask some awesome questions of some extremely knowledgeable people, and have a good time on oddities and everything else that we do over there. Of course, you get entered then. When you sign up, you get entered into our monthly drawing, which is coming up for October for the old Options Insider Pro Trading Crate. So get in there before the end of the month so you can add your name to the potential list of winners. Remember, only the pro folks can win that stuff. So fun stuff over there. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. And let's see where we're going to go on our journey across the country today. First, let's start out close to home because we don't feel like going far. We're kind of tired. Maybe we're cranky, maybe we're groggy, all of the above. So let's just go right outside Chicago to the hinterlands known as St. Charles, where we are joined once again by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the program, sir.
Happy to be here, and I am neither tired nor groggy.
Well, good to hear it. Let's go out now to a part of the country where they are always tired and groggy. They're pretty much just cranky all the time, and it's hard to blame them because, of course, it is the shores of Maine, where things are always dark, things are always stormy, and as we zoom on in, listeners, the camera zooms down the shores of Maine. We see this dark and imposing fortress-like compound on the shores there. It can be only one thing, the GIOVINAZZI fortress-like compound, and deep inside the compound, you see one little tower peeking out through the fog and the clouds, and a little light shining out of it, and that's where we find the Rock Lobster. Hopefully the crickets are all dead. He's in there slinging some Vicks probably as we speak. Mr. G, welcome back to the program, sir. Quite the setup for you today.
I was about to say I don't think you do a setup for that like any other of your co-hosts. I appreciate the thought and care that you put into that.
Well, I've tried with St. Charles with the rickets and the stuff, but they didn't appreciate that. So, I go my own way sometimes here on the program as we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades and trends in the world of options. It's time for The Trading Block.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let us commence our options voyage today. And coming into showtime here, we are seeing a bit of a mixed day out there. Again, it kind of depends where you hang your hat, what kind of day you're having out there. If you're an S&P person, like a lot of our audiences, you're kind of unched. You kind of, you're shrugging your shoulders slightly off on the day, but not really doing a heck of a lot. If you're a NASDAQ person, you're saying, woohoo, up nearly 0.5%, about 0.4%. So not a full wee, but maybe perhaps a woohoo. You're up like 1.5%, 2% or anything like that. But you're up when everything else is red. And actually, the Dow is kind of wiping away a single tear out there because it's off in the other direction. Pretty much the exact opposite. So you're off almost 0.4% in the Dow and up almost 0.4% in the NASDAQ. And the S&P kind of just shrugging and sitting there watching the two of them do their thing. I mean, it's coming into showtime. We are seeing VIX relaxing a bit, off about a point from where it was this time last show. So down to about a 15.5, actually a little bit below that now. Coming into showtime was at about a 15.5. That puts it down a little over a point from this time last show. So down to that mid 15 range. I know what a lot of you are thinking. Oh my God, it's so low. I got to buy some upside. Just if you think that, remember, go check out that This Is Not Normal episode we just posted of Options Bootcamp. Maybe disabuse you of some of those notions. Or if you want to see it for yourself, just go back and look at the data from any time in the year 2017, the entire year. And then go argue with me that 15.5, I got to buy the 30s. Maybe dial it back a little bit. Not saying we can't get back up there. Sure, we can. Other things can happen as well. Just be prepared for that. VVIX at about a 103. That's the lowest we've seen in a little while. It's down about 4 points from where it was this time last show. Dare I say it? Are we going to break through the triple digits in VVIX? We'll have to stay tuned. VXX at about a 21.75, kicking off the show. Puts it down, about 0.75 from where it was on Monday's show. UVXY is just going to zero in a freaking heart. Remember, this thing just reverse split 4-for-1 not that long ago, listeners. And it did that when it got down to about a 10. We're already threatening that again. 1685 coming into showtime, down a full point from where it was this time last show. And VolQ, weirdly enough, unched pretty much at about a 15.75, which is pretty much exactly where it was on Monday's show. So VolQ, the one laggard of the bunch, everything else in the vol space, decided to go somewhere. Let's go out to the land of St. Charles again. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what's lighting up your tape on this? If you're hanging out in the NASDAQ, Uncle Mike type of day, everywhere else, not so much.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems to me like at least from the standpoint of the S&P, we have oil down. We have XLE down almost 2% on the day. So the oil stocks are pulling back a little bit. We have the financials down 0.65% on the day, looking at XLF. So we do have that. But the thing that I'm definitely noticing is the fact that we have technology higher on the day. And looking at this, where the Qs are up fairly decent, and then the consumer discretionaries, looking at XLY, is actually what's holding up this market. So when looking at this, we have a market that's kind of, I don't know if it looks like it's waiting and seeing for the real earnings coming out next week. I thought we'd have more movement this week with the earnings that we've had this week. Apparently I was wrong. It's making me think of the judge in Caddyshack when he said some people just don't belong. And that's kind of what the market's saying about these earnings announcements for this week. They don't care. We want the real earnings announcements next week with the Apples, the Amazons, and so forth. So I think we're waiting the market's kind of waiting to show its hand with that. We are to the downside a little bit in the 10-year note. We're getting some sellers in there. And I think that's all kind of where it looks like we're kind of reallocating. Like I think Sebastian and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, it's kind of a reallocation day in that we have money coming out of the Dow, but we have pretty much not a lot of movement in the S&P. We have money coming out of the 10-year note, and then it's going into the more tech-heavy NASDAQ. Now, in looking at the sectors, of course, what I think is driving the more tech-heavy NASDAQ is the consumer discretionaries, because XLK is relatively flat on the day. But it's like for the S&P, we have some sectors up, some sectors down, and just stuff moving around. But at least in the world of the S&P, which is responsible for 80% of all of U.S. business and commerce, not a lot going on. So there's a lot going on, but yet not a lot of movement. So it's kind of an interesting day from that standpoint. But in reality, I think that since we didn't get a lot of movement this week, then I think we're going to have more movement in the market next week. Based on the earnings that we have coming up in the next week.
Yeah, we got some big names popping off. We'll get to all of that in a little bit when we break down the earnings move results, and earnings season reports, listeners. But first, let's go out back to the dark and stormy fortress, to that Seoul Tower and that one beacon of light shining through the darkness. Mr. Rock Lobster, sir, what is on that light? What is coming off your screens? What is catching your eye today, sir?
Well, so here's a pattern that I notice. You have the world global climate change, whatever it is, right? They're talking about the climate, let's say, whatever that is. They all get together and, they have nice dinners and they talk about the climate. They all fly their private planes and talk about the irony of that, of course, is just, I think it's rich. Anyway. That being said, normally these climate summits are bad for oil stocks. So the summit's kicking off, and I think oil will be weak during the summit. However, my compadre and I, Frank Gregory and I, look at oil and say, you know what? Oil has a long way to run because we all are going to need it, even if we do the green energy thing. How are you going to make all the infrastructure to do the green energy? In case anybody checked, you need petroleum. So the COVID was, I think, clearly a short-term change in demand, and a lot of people are staying home. But, if you think about it, now all of a sudden, I think people are driving around. Things are somewhat getting back to normal, although I'm sure there's a lot less commuters. But also production has been shut down considerably. So, all that stuff will need to go up at some point. But as of right now, so I think oil will stay weak. And of course that leads to, okay, so if oil's weak and I'm, selling my oil, whatever, what do I go buy? And we have technology earnings coming out. So I think that's and next week are the big ones. We have Intel tonight. There was a little bit of a canary in the coal mine with Taiwan Semiconductor, which is like their products are very, in demand. They do, fab and refab for people or whatever. Just they make a lot of chips. They're on the island of Taiwan, and I think they trade at a little bit of a discount because everybody thinks the Chinese are going to come in and take over the island. Anyway, they reported very solid earnings and growth, kind of out of sight. So, it was expected, right? And I think right now the Qs are priced on a high expectation. But then we have Netflix that came out, and and they're a FANG company. But again, it's really weird. I think they're more an entertainment company now than the technology, although they clearly blend the two very well. But Netflix came out kind of gangbuster. That the online, internet business model that Amazon and gosh knows and Google and everybody else, as a bellwether, that's a pretty solid one. So I'm just saying, so far, banks making money, but a lot of that was reserves coming off of COVID. But again, those are positives, not negatives, right? If banks don't need to keep reserves, they're looking for growth and maybe even trying to lend people money. So just you look at the landscape and there's more bad, I think more good than bad. And then politically, I think, I think the spending bill, the cost is going way down, whatever is going to pass. The filibuster is still there. So you have, once again, dysfunctional Washington, which I think actually the market likes when Washington doesn't do too much. I mean, you can argue with these mandates and other things like that. But at this point, the less they do, the better. And the market likes that. We've said this plenty of times on the show. The market likes certainty. And Washington being dysfunctional, I think, is a fairly certain commodity. I think it actually works better because generally when those guys get together, politicians, we can see they generally don't really come up with great ideas. So the fact that it's kind of moving this way, I like a lot. But anyway, so I think that's what we got as far as markets go. I think oil will be weak. And then after this conference, I think it will start to resume its climb. So that's a trade I'm looking at. I'm not dipping my toe into the oil water for new stuff today, but I am marking stuff that I want to buy as this conference wears on. So I think that will be a good opportunity. And as far as that, we're starting to plunge new depths in VXX. So I think this is all good stuff.
We're flirting with the zone of the monk again in VIX. Not quite there yet, sir, but we're certainly not
quite there. Like this, the fact that we're moving down zone 2 is big, but the zone of the monk is 12. And at this rate, that I'm not going to complain about it, but I think that would be a hard. I can see us maybe seeing a 13 or 14 handle, as hard as it is to believe. If whatever the status quo is stays and tech earnings are just reasonable through next week, I mean, Friday could be a very interesting day for the vol products and for VIX. Not this Friday, but next Friday. So, you remember that of listeners, like SPX and VIX are kind of always like kind of these gigantic earnings plays where, all the macro, all the macro news kind of plays themselves out if you're a short-term trader. Like the short-term really matters. If you're long-term, like TOSAW, the short-term is just an opportunity to get long, right? As long as he's bullish. When everybody kind of freaks out, Mike's there to buy. But if you're a short-term trader, all this news matters because that's kind of how you're going to, how you position yourself, especially with vol, right? Vol tends to bid a little bit into an event and sell off after the event. So I think those are, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that you have, a huge cycle. So far, earnings have been good. I mean, I think the pandemic has been very good for the large corporation and not good for the Main Street mom and pop thing. Hopefully that will start to turn around here a little bit. But that's what I see right now.
Indeed. And what we see right now is a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Looks like our chat is really seeing good old DWAC out there, which is a crazy one, listeners. If you've been paying attention to this, everyone's up in arms about it in our chat, how crazy it is. Yeah, this is the Digital World Acquisition Corp. This is, of course, the SPAC that Trump just turned on its ear today, or really gave a shot in the arm, I guess you can, depending on how you look at it, out there saying he's going to go public with his own social media. He said, the heck with these, the Facebooks or whatever they're going to call themselves now, and all the rest of the world who have all said no to him. He's going to make his own. He's merging with this, leveraging really this existing SPAC, this DWAC. This thing is off to the races today, up $19.50 or 196%. And it looks like, now my chart is playing with me, but looks like this thing went out back in 2017. Yeah, actually at $25. So now it has blown through that. But for a long time, these investors or holders of this thing were actually underwater. It went out, looks like, at $25 in November of 2017. Well, not quite so promptly. Over the course of years, traded down to $9.94, where it's kind of looks like it's been hanging out pretty much for a while. And then all of a sudden we have this gap back up here. So it's been an interesting one to watch. Yeah, this news kind of came out of left field for a lot of people, and interesting to watch. Unfortunately, again, not really an option story. So we weren't planning on talking about it, but again, you guys have it, a little bee in your bonnet for it. I get it. It's crazy. It would be nice in retrospect to have had options on this thing, but you're not going to have options on every rando SPAC lurking out there, just on the off chance that they have a Trump-driven acquisition or deal that drives them up 200%. That would be nice, but the world of options is already too big with too many names that don't trade. We don't need a bunch of other ones hanging out there. But this one, if it continues on this path, I got a feeling we might be seeing some options on this front. Let's look at the options that we are seeing, though. Turning to today's paper, Seeing some paper, kind of depends where you're looking out there. VIX kind of light at about 210,000 contracts, but it's not nothing. It's not like it's doing 103,000 or something like that. So it's not quite half, but it's getting there. It's on its way to half of its ADV. The ADV is right around 460. And then we have SPY just north of 2 million, about 2.05 million. The ADV in SPY has actually come off quite a bit in the last week or so. It was at about 5.7 million on our last show. Now it's down to about 5.36 million. So those seem like pretty lofty numbers for SPY. I wasn't sure if they could maintain them for long. It looks like the answer was no, at least in the short term. SPX light as well, 543,000 contracts. The ADV out there is still about 1.6 million. It's come off a little bit as well. It was about 1.7 million. That's still a lot for the S. The Qs, 540,000 contracts. The ADV about 1.6 million as well. And small caps at 270,000. The ADV 560. If you want more small caps and equity vol and everything else, we'll get into that a little bit later with the once and future Dr. VIX coming up on TWIFO in about a little over an hour. Let's get on out now to the single names where you folks are hanging out, and a lot of craziness has happened out there outside of DWAC. I'm sure if it had options, we'd see it on this list today, but unfortunately we do not. Instead, we cost you 241,000 contracts to break into the top 10. So that's a decent amount. I use that kind of barometer of about 250,000, and this is pretty close to that. So if you're up at that level, it's a pretty active day in the single names, regardless of what's happening in the broad indices. AMC is number 10 today with 241,000. Number 9, NVIDIA. Again, the day that ends in Y, going to have NVIDIA in there somewhere. Today it's number 9, 294,000. Number 8, the other half of the new symbol twinology, AMD, 297,000 contracts. Number 7, got the aforementioned Netflix popping off earlier this week, doing some paper out there today to the tune of 302,000 contracts. Netflix, by the way, at about $24 today, or nearly 4%. So nice pop for them. Nearly 650, 649 or so hovering right now. DIDI going back out to China. I haven't talked about DIDI in a while, but they're on our radar today as well. They're up $1 or about 12.25% today to 970, and they're putting up 331,000 contracts out there. So DIDI looking pretty good here. And then number 5, we have PayPal. PayPal back in the top 10. I haven't talked about them in a while. 380,000 contracts. If you're wondering, they're off $12.50 or nearly 5% today, trading about 245 and change, almost 246. So rough day for PayPal. Number 4, back out to Sundial. Man, last I checked, the stock was like 60 odd cents. So this thing is an option in and of itself. Let's see where it's trading right now. Oh, it's up to 74 cents. This one cracks me up, but this doesn't dissuade people from slinging options like they're going out of style. 411,000 contracts on this thing today. My goodness, up 8.5%. This thing's kind of been in the doldrums for the last few months. It was trading 63 cents not that long ago out there. So this thing has kind of been languishing, getting a little bit of a lift today. But still, even with today's lift over the past 6 months, it's still off about 15%. So Sundial. So I guess, the old, don't trade options under $5 or whatever, stocks under $5. Not applying here to Sundial. Folks are lighting it up. Number 3, it's our old friend. Is it a meme? Is it not? I leave it up to you to decide. But it's putting up meme numbers today. It's Ford. 676,000. It's at 16.5 right now. That's quite the run for Ford. My goodness, this thing has been on a tear. It was trading 12 not too long ago out there. So let's see, how long ago back do we have to get? 12 handle. A little over a month ago, September 9th, September 10th, it was still trading in the 10th handle. September 14th even. So nice pop over the past few months. Maybe all those folks who put on all those 20 calls in Ford we've been talking about for months with wasted money, they were just a little ahead of the game. They just have to go back out and do it again, and maybe this time. Third time's the charm. Let's go to number 3, Apple. 760,000 contracts. That's kind of a rounding error for Apple. That means number 1, the big dog today is Tesla. Tesla putting up some numbers out there today to the tune of nearly 2 million contracts, 1.97 million contracts up there right now in Tesla. That's up about $26 or about a little over 3% today. So big day out there for Tesla. Let's break down some of those big days out there right now. We got some big names popping off out there, and we have earnings move results reports for a lot of them. Let's see how many we could squeeze in for you. Let's go to Beamer. They were yesterday after the bell. 142 is where they were going into their announcement. They were pricing in 3.5%. They delivered 7.5%, listeners. Ooh, outperformance. Here we go. CROX. They were today before the bell. 136 is where they were trading. They were pricing in 7.5%. They delivered 9.3%, 2 for 2 in the outperformance camp. Can we keep it going? Let's see. Tesla. Now, this is an interesting one because it's actually moving right now, but still interesting nonetheless. Going into its announcement, 865.80. They were pricing in 3.9%, and they delivered in the initial blush 2.1%. Of course, we all know with Tesla, you got to wait a little bit, and it's up 3% right now, so it has gotten some of that back, but still not quite the almost 4% they were pricing in. So interestingly enough, still an underperformance from an earnings vol perspective, which is interesting. American Airlines, before the bell today, 19.5 is where they were trading. They were pricing in 4.4%. They delivered, get this, listeners, 1.8%. So we have an underperformance here. Now we're starting to see the other side of this coin, listeners. Southwest, a.k.a. Love, 49.5 is where they were trading. They were pricing in 3.4%. They delivered 1.4%. It seemed like Southwest, of any of the airlines, was poised to deliver some vol, and yet not the case, listeners. AT&T, a.k.a. Telephone, 25.91. They were pricing in 2.7%. They delivered, get this, listeners, 0.4%. That's what I'm used to seeing for almost the entirety of the earnings and, the pandemic era, is just completely negligible earnings announcements. So we started off good. We had Beamer and Crocs, but we kind of led with the best, it seems like. And let's look, our friends over there at Ally Invest, Brian and his ilk over there. They were before the bell today. They were at 55.81. They were pricing in 3.9%. They delivered 3.6%. So close to in line, at least, kind of almost breaking through there. So that's interesting. But yeah, just impressive stuff here and kind of crazy stuff here across the board. Kind of depends where you're looking. Right now, it looks like one of the largest outperformers we have is Kinder Morgan. This is an energy infrastructure company, obviously. Oil, natural gas, all that fun stuff. They were, yesterday after the bell, they went to their announcement, 1865. They were pricing in 2%. They delivered 5%. So more than 2x their earnings straddle. So that's interesting. They're off 6% right now, so moving even more out there. So it kind of depends where you're looking out there, how your day is lighting up. So we do have some. Actually, I can count them with one hand almost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 names outperforming out of a couple of pages worth of announcements, listeners. So unfortunately, it still seems like the lion's share of the action is to the dark side here. Let's see if we can find a couple more. So let's go to Las Vegas Sands, ticker symbol LVS. They were yesterday after the bell, 39.5 is where they were trading. They were pricing in 5%. They delivered 1.8%. I'm starting to get a bit of a pattern here, listeners. Let's see if we can see any other ones here that are, looks like there's a bunch of other ones here, but not a lot of hot ones that you folks like to trade out here. You can check them out for yourselves. All these tickers and a whole bunch more. TheOptionsInsider.com. Go to the Options News and Articles tab, click on the Earnings Season Reports, and bam, you're off to the races. Speaking of the Earnings Season Reports, right now we're hanging out at an apocalyptic 59% for this season. So after starting off strong in week 1 with 106%, actually outperforming, this week, listeners, has been just abysmal. 45% in terms of how much they were pricing in versus how much bang for their buck was actually delivered. Wow, that's no bueno. Again, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, this was supposed to be the cycle that was going to do it. And that first week delivered. And now we're starting to see maybe a little bit more of what's actually going on out there. But we shall see. I hold out hope that we can actually deliver a rock'em sock'em robots cycle. Let's look really quickly ahead because there are some big names popping off. The Rock Lobster talked about Intel. They're after the bell today. My old stomping grounds out there in Intel. Back when I was out there, man, Intel earnings, it was like Tesla and Apple combined. It was Intel and Microsoft were kind of the big dogs. Where they led, everybody else followed. And that's why I was out there. And so they were the big beasts. And when they pre-announced bad earnings, A, that was an amazing, crazy trading time, probably the craziest in my life. And then B, yeah, it was kind of the canary in the coal mine for the beginning of the end of the dot-com boom, shall we say. Intel, a very different beast now. Let's see, they're popping off today after the bell. 55.5 is where they were trading. They're pricing in 239. In the past, they've moved 378. So they've gotten the memo over there. Lighter juice is the way to go. Snap today after the bell as well. 75.65. They're pricing in 7.15. In the past, they moved nearly $12, so a lot less juice on that one. Then let's go out to the Rock Lobsters neck of the woods. Let's go out to Honeywell. He loves them. They're tomorrow before the bell. 223.64 is where they were trading. They're pricing in about $5. In the past, they've moved about $5. So nothing really exciting there. And let's go to American Express really quickly as well. Tomorrow before the bell, 179.60 is where they were trading. They were pricing in about almost $5, $4.92. In the past, they've moved $4.42. So 50 cents extra juice in American Express. If this week is a preview of what's to come, then perhaps that is not a good choice. But we shall see. Let's go out to our old friend. We actually talked about them recently on the Odd Block. OTIS Elevators. They're on the 25th before the bell. Let's see what kind of elevator vol they're pricing in. They're at 85.5 right now. They're pricing in 335. In the past, they've moved 314. So a little bit extra elevator vol. Is that warranted, or is elevator vol about to go down as we continue right on into the Odd Block?
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
Oh, yes. Bad elevator puns. That's why you guys come to this show in droves, for my quality puns. Let's keep on rolling. Let us unleash the eye of Sauron, see where it fixes its gaze today. First, going to go out to some familiar stomping grounds. We've been talking about this name a few times. In fact, we just paid off some trades for this one on our Options Oddities show. But it's coming back up on our radar again today. It's hard to ignore. It's so freaking sizable. It is good old Vodafone. Once again, back on our radar. Of course, the British Telecom. Ticker symbol VOD, VOD. Trading right now right around $15.50, off about 16 cents or about 1% today. This is the name we talked about before, so I won't go deep into its backstory. A year ago, $14.33, and then it sold off to about looks like $13.20. That was pretty much the low for the year in October of last year. Then it kind of rallied pretty much all the way up to, in May of last year, was $20.36. That was the high for the year. Then it sold off hard down to $18. That was just in the next week. And then over the course of the next month and change, it got down to $15.69, so right where it is right now. And it's kind of hovered in this range, got a little higher up to 17 in September, then kind of gave it back again to where we find ourselves right now, $15.65. So we talked about in our oddity show, there was some oppressive upside, as I recall there. And it's like, I think most of it, if not all of it, went the way of the dodo out there. Let's see what we see today. It looks like someone repeating the pattern, Mr. Rock Lobster, repeat offenders in Vodafone. Because some folks are not done with this name by a long shot. Someone coming out there today. This is one of the more sizable, not the largest single name options print we've seen going up so far today. 44,013. I love the 13. 13 just sitting in the book. They had to take those two. 44,013 of the April 17th. Now, we talked about this before. April, it looks weird. It looks like it's a weekly, but I do believe that's the Good Friday holiday, which truncates that week, which is why it looks like it's a weekly. But the April 17s for 50 cents, lifting the offer, and these went up late, so maybe take the execution with a grain of salt, but they just devoured that offer. I'm surprised they didn't have to go through it to get this done. These were about a 26, almost a 27 vol. This was opening. The OI was nowhere near this. And the stock was a little bit higher, actually, when these went up, 15.62. Obviously, between now and April, you're going to get some earnings cycles. The next one is on November 16th. So you get a couple of tilts at the earnings windmill in this as well. Mr. Rock Lobster, we've talked about size upside in Vodafone before. Apparently, we are not done with that yet. More really sizable upside call love in Vodafone, this time out to April, sir. What say you?
I look at this one and I'm like, I understand people's interest in this one, right? Like wanting to buy calls because it's an undervalued property. They have they have a kind of a varied dividend. Sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's not. It's one of those things where I think, if you're an income trader, I think it makes a good, it's an interesting, good stock. You know, you want to have the bucks coming in every year. But like you buy calls in this thing and it always feels like calls are replaced. You know, this is a stock where calls kind of go to die. However, okay, that being said, I am a fan of buying things on dips, especially what I would call top 2,000 companies, like top 2,000 market cap companies. Every company comes under hard times. The market doesn't like them, blah, 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 blah. The algos hate them. The news is bad. And, you know, this is one where, okay, Vodafone, cell phones, got it. Not super exciting, but at the bottom of the range and the market's at the all-time high. I just, you know, like, unless, you know, Google Fi or, you know, Tesla, which I don't put it past them, by the way, can give the entrenched cell phone companies a run for their money. I don't think this is a bad stock to own. Personally, I would rather write the 17 call. It's not that much money. But I think at this point at $15.50, you just buy the stock and get the divvy and, you know, and go woohoo. So, you know, the stock was $20. So yeah, by April, I mean, the price is right. Do I think these people will probably make money at some point? Yeah, I think so. I mean, you could also have the chance to write some 17 calls against it. Let's see here. Like, yeah. I mean, even the D17s are like 10 cents, right? So they're not expecting anything fantastic. If you look at Verizon and AT&T lately, I think because there are some whispers of threats, you know, like actual, competing services. I don't know what Musk is going to do from satellites. I have to say that guy if he's not the best businessman in history, he certainly is the best marketer and salesman because he continues to do pretty amazing things, just somehow. And right now, like the cell phone market there's a lot of profits in it. And I could see that it would catch somebody like, you know, a guy like him. He's like, wow, there's a lot of money there. And he probably thinks the way they do things are really bad because they're all outshoots of the old AT&T monopoly, right? So I'm sure we'll see something better in the future, which is why I think those companies trade at just low multiples. But anyway, so do these calls have a chance to work? Yes. But I think it's probably rather just sort of a better put right or something like that. I think you would do better just writing the at the money put every week in Vodafone and just roll it, and you would do better than buying those calls.
That would have worked out of late.
Considerably, the risk is more.
That would have worked out of late. Look at you talking about Google Fi. How have you heard of such things in the hinterlands of Maine where you barely have a wire to string together?
Shows up. You know what the weirdest thing is? Google Fi shows up. I'm looking at how to shape a surfboard, right? Because I'm finishing my paddleboard, and Google Fi ad shows up. Like what the hell is it? Is it a phone service? Like, the ad is so annoying, though. I would not buy whatever it is.
See, you're exactly their target demographic. You know, the lone woodworker who's living in isolation on the shores of Maine. That's who Google clearly is going after with that service there. So well done, Google, spending your marketing dollar as well. As we keep on rolling. It worked, though. He knows of your service, which is surprising in and of itself. Let's keep on rolling out there to a service we used to talk about a lot more back in the day. It's kind of fallen off the radar a bit. This is ZNGA. We have talked about them a little bit recently, though, a little bit popping up on our radar. And they're back again also with looks like some April upside love. Let's do the quick and dirty love on ZNGA because we got to get rolling here. A year ago, it was trading $9.11, so inauspicious level. Sold off to their 52-week low came later. Excuse me, it sold off to about $8. Then they rallied by February up to their 52-week high of $12.32. Sold off pretty quickly down to $9.85 actually on March 8th. Hung out on that level for a while and then sold off again aggressively in August, back down to from about $10 down to $8 very quickly within a session or two. Then they tried to rally up to about 9, didn't make it, and they've been selling off pretty much ever since. Got down to the 52-week low recently of 714, and then just in the last week or so, they've started rallying again. They've rallied from about, it's like their low was 736 all the way up to where we find them today, 788 out there. So up a little bit, about 2% again today. So let's see what our Eye of Sauron found. Again, back to April. April seems to be the new hot cycle. The April 12s. So we're talking the stock's at 788. The 52-week high is 1232. So someone thinks they're going to revisit those 52-week highs by the April cycle. They're willing to pay the offer of 13 cents 5,000 times for the privilege. That is about a 45 vol if you're wondering, listeners. The stock was pretty much right about here when those went up. There are earnings, as you might imagine. Their next announcement is on November 8th. You're probably going to get 2 baked into that cycle for that price. So you do get a couple of announcements at least, which is nice. But next time is November 8th. Mr. Rock Lobster, once again, back to Zynga as well. This time to the 12s. So also somewhat optimistic, sir.
Again, Zynga, oh my gosh. This takes me back. Was it Grigas? Didn't he like this one?
It was Grigas. He loaded up on the 5s, and I remember us mocking him mercilessly. The stock was, I think, 3.5 or something, and he just couldn't get enough of the 5s.
This is another stock where calls go to die, as I recall. They had a chance to break into the online gambling thing or sports betting or something, and then the CEO at the time passed on the whole idea, which was kind of the end of the stock for about, 5 or 6 years. I've been on the show for so long, like I'm dating it in decades now. Was it the first decade I did the show or the second decade I did the show? Which is quite hard to believe.
It was the Grigas decade, which was when we were still doing stuff with Schwab and OX. So it's been a while.
It's been a little bit of a while. So, I look at this one and Zynga's another one, again, low price stock. The whole, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I try to get my head wrapped around what people are trying to do. The price is, I'll give it to them. The price is right, 13 cents, but you're looking for almost a double in the stock to get there. What does that have to go, 50%, something like that? I guess it has a shot. It has, I guess they have a shot. I'll give it that. They have an outside shot, but after the last earnings, it hadn't seen 12 since February of this year. I don't think Zynga has ever really figured out how to make it happen since their, what I would call auspicious debut as a early, social media type tech company, right? What did they do? The Cities game or something like that? I can't quite remember what their game was.
I think they had Candy Crush back, and I think that was them back in the day.
Was that Candy Crush?
I think so. One of those big mobile games, yeah.
And I think they found a way to make a little money along the way. I think they made the most money buying that piece of property in San Francisco when they IPO'd.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They had the real estate department. There's been so many moving pieces of this over the years.
Because I think when they built that building, it took out my favorite Vietnamese place on the corner. But hopefully the Vietnamese family made good money selling their storefront or whatever. So, but anyway, be that as it may, them ruining my culinary happiness. Okay, I mean, price is right. They're a shot. I mean, you got to call what it is. A shot is a shot. And, in this market, it hasn't been the first time calls people have paid 12 or 13 cents for have been worth like $1 or $2 or 5 or 10. So, the price is right, I'll say. You want to take a flyer on a 10 lot, knock yourself out.
All right. And we have to knock ourselves out with our last one. We'll do this one quickly here because we want to get to some of you folks. And we just added 2 more to watch in our file. We got to take some out. So let's go back now to September 20th show. So pretty much exactly a month ago, listeners, we talked about someone just going to town, gobbling up all of the possible puts they could get in everyone's favorite power name, Ballard Power, ticker symbol BLDP. 26,100 to be precise of the OC13 puts going up for 16.5 cents. They were, by the way, 15 at 30. As the day went on, They bought a total of 27,000, so about another 1,000 more went up. The stock was 15 and a quarter. There were still 27,000 puts open on expiration here. Let me just look really quickly to see, because these were I think weird ones at the time. The market was so weird, and we saw someone hitting the bid. So you can look at these a couple of different ways. The stock closed on expiration, by the way, 15 and 3/4. So far away from the 13 strike. Go figure, there were still 27,000 of these bad boys still open when expiration rolled through, listeners. So we have a couple of things we can look at this. The fact that it was right off the bid, we could think that they potentially sold this bad boy, in which case they pocketed almost $500,000, about $450,000 on these puts. Or the flip side, since that market was so weird, and I think the print went up late, it's kind of hard to read into it. They could have bought these, in which case they lost roughly $500,000, $450,000. But you can also intuit from that they probably have a fair amount of shares of stock, in which case they probably made over $1 million on the movement in the stock since then, about 1.3, almost $1.4 million on the stock. So they're net happy on the deal nonetheless. Mr. Rock Lobster, which way do you interpret this trade, sir?
Should I put it through the Interpretron?
The Rock Lobster Interpromatic.
The Interpromatic. Okay. Ballard puts. Yeah. It does have that look and feel, doesn't it? Let's see here. So what do you mean by the interpretation? It looks like it looks like they just went out. It looks like the puts went out worthless.
They did. Do you think they bought them, or do you think they sold them?
Well, let's see here. I'm seeing 16 cents, right? I think this was a line in the sand put.
Yeah, it seems that way. I'm looking at some of the other prints that went up that same day because they did a total of 27,000. They also hit the bid, weirdly enough, after this for 15 cents. So it looks like there must have been a better bid. They crushed it for 16.5 cents, and they got the rest off at 15 cents. So it does look like these were sales. So yes, it looks like they kept their money on this bad boy. Or we have our chat saying that Zynga actually makes Farmville, and that's why the stock hasn't gone anywhere, because Candy Crush is the actual moneymaker. I knew someone made Candy Crush. I thought it was Zynga. Speaking of you folks, let's get to some of you as we head on into the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, let's get to it. Let's dive into our question of the week this week first. We asked you last week, when did you start trading options? That was fascinating. Fully a third of you have started trading since the pandemic began, which is fascinating to hear and see. And if you're listening, welcome, as we know many of you are. And now we asked you why, kind of the related question. Why did you start trading options? Gave you 4 chances, or I should say 4 choices. Catching the meme stock wave, hedging your stock portfolio, getting more portfolio leverage, or you decided you wanted to graduate from futures. We also have the much wanted other. You guys can write in with your other reasons. I know there are many and varied. Mr. Uncle Mike, we'll start with you, sir. What do you think is winning our portfolio, or I should say our question right now?
I'm going to go with leverage. I think that's why people want to get into it, especially the fact that we have a lot of newer people in it.
So they're not catching the meme stock wave. They're going for the leverage. Okay. Mr. Rock Lobster, do you agree with that, or do you have an alternate suggestion?
I think people, well, at least a lot of the people that I run into at Option Pit, but maybe we have a different group, they're looking more to hedge a portfolio. At least I'm going to say the Option Pit standard student that stays here, like, we've had students that enjoy the education and kind of use it, like their option TV show, basically, come in during the week. They consume, a few hours of content every week about learning how options work. Because we kind of run the gamut. So I would say for Option Pit students, it would definitely be learning how to hedge. However, the new generation, I would say, is leverage.
Remember, this is going out to a much, much larger audience. This is going out to everybody out there.
So I'm just going to say for the Option Pit person or anybody, the person that's interested in that, that's what Option Pit helps people do. But I'm going to say in meme land, it's all leverage, baby.
And you are both correct. Higher portfolio leverage, 57.1%, followed by graduating from futures, getting more futures love in the audience than I expected, 23.8%, hedging your stock portfolio only 14.3%, and surprisingly catching the meme stock wave. I would have expected maybe the futures and the meme stock to be reversed, but c'est la vie, 4.8%. No love for the meme stock wave. You have about a day left in that one, listeners. So if you haven't played yet, get on out there. Speaking of, this is the fun one. My producer just put this in. This is just coming in during showtime. This is why I love our audience. You guys throw us left field stuff. You see things that are crazy, like remember the old elbow drop windshield wipers and everything else, and you love to bring them to our attention, like this. This comes from J4340. He has written in before. That name sounds familiar. He said, did you guys see this article? Is this what the Rock Lobster has been up to? And he sends us a link to, I had never heard this before. He says a link of the article entitled China-Linked Disinformation Campaign Blames COVID on Maine Lobsters. This is an actually legitimate, this is from NBC News. It says the University of Oxford found evidence that pro-China social media accounts are pushing a new thread of propaganda related to the origins of the pandemic and Mr. Rock Lobster. I'm sad to say it is in your neck of the woods. Your primary export in Maine has been the cause of all of our woes, sir. How dare you? For shame.
I saw that, and yes, the COVID virus developed deep underneath the seafloor. I'm sure. That would be the first time ever a virus came from the bottom of the ocean. So, what was interesting too is that there's actually a seat at the university that tries to look around to debunk internet myths. Also, it also tells you something that if the Chinese are actually going to that much trouble, the virus probably came from the Wuhan lab. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
So you actually had heard of this.
I know.
This is a story.
Actually, one of my students sent it to me, and I was laughing like crazy.
I had never heard of this before, so that's hilarious. I guess it makes sense. In Maine, it probably would be a big deal.
Yes, but I think I'm saying the odds of that are nil. I think they actually don't lobsters. I think it's horseshoe crabs. I think the blood of a horseshoe crab actually is quite medicinal, and they use it to create medicine.
Yeah, the horseshoe. I don't think the lobster is as useful. It's tasty, but not as quite as useful as the horseshoe crab.
Right.
But there you go. See, he's heard of that story, Jay. I hadn't even heard of this. See, that's why I love you folks. You throw me curveballs all the time. Now it's time for us to throw you a few curveballs. It is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show we tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next episode coming up on Monday. Mr. Uncle Mike, a lot to keep an eye on here. Of course, we've got the S&P. We've got your favorite crypto hitting new highs. We, of course, have the unfolding saga over the Maine Lobsters. What is on your radar, sir? What are you keeping an eye on until our next show?
I wasn't aware of the scandal that's going on in Maine, so I mean, I'm going to have to keep my eye on.
No, you've talked to the Rock Lobster for how many years now? Does any of this really surprise you that they would be up to some skullduggery in Maine, sir?
Well, I mean, he accused me of skullduggery, but I'm not gonna sink to his level. So I think the Rock Lobsters, he's on the up and up. I think, even though he does make baseless claims of election fraud, but nonetheless, I digress. I think that with where we are. The thing that I am watching right now is we are selling off in the 10-year note, continuing to watch that. We've actually been going down the last couple of weeks in that. So we have the yields rising in that. Watching that, we do have a lower VIX right now. So continuing to watch that. And I think this is just going to be interesting to see how this all plays out in earnings next week. I'd be very surprised if we're at the same levels a week from now than we are today.
Yeah, interesting week out here from a skullduggery level. I do believe many of the fishing boats in Maine were financed by the Wuhan virus laboratory. Whoever would have suspected such a thing out there? And also, of course, a lot of earnings to keep an eye on out there as well. Mr. Rock Lobster, A, defend yourself from all these, just scandalous allegations. And then B, what are you keeping an eye on as we slowly encroach upon the zone of the monk, sir?
I think the skullduggery actually emanated from your camp, Mr. Longo. again, I think I got thrown under the skullduggery bus. I might have jumped on the bandwagon. That's certainly possible.
You certainly jumped on the bandwagon. The skullduggery emanated from Uncle Mike.
You were on the bandwagon.
You just contributed to the fanning the flames.
I guess once I see that fire, I can't help putting a little gasoline on it. That might be a personal issue of mine. However, yes, there are several brand new fishing boats in Maine that are sporting new paint jobs, by the way, as a result of this Wuhan flu that emanated from lobsters. So maybe the fishermen are claiming that they brought up a lobster that was actually coughing, a coughing lobster, the first ever maybe from history. What am I watching? Okay, I'll say this. Tesla. All right. Lowest volatility in a year, maybe 2 years right now. Stock looks like it wants to go back to 1,000 now that they've had 3 record profitable quarters in a row. Like I said, that guy is a magician. And apparently they're making money. So again, I'm not going to, I find that as an interesting thing. And I'm just saying it's $8.89 right now. And it would not surprise me. It's $1,000 by the end of the year, just because, where does the person that's green really go? Where, it has, think of one stock when you say, okay, green energy and environment-friendly and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Every green human in the world thinks Tesla, even though they're relocating to Austin, Texas from California.
The Chevy Volt, which they just recalled, that's the one I'm going for. There we go. It's all recalled. You can't buy it now, but someday when it stops catching on fire, that's the one.
I'll just say the guy is a master. No question about that. And right next to it on my screen, actually, I have a stock called TPIC, which makes the wind turbine blades. That stock has gone nowhere all year. It's down $1 today, and Tesla's up $23. So that just says where the greens are putting their money. As far as where we are, I have to say, decent earnings in those big stocks. I think Intel will be a huge tell. And I think you'll see 4,600 on the S&P 500. I've been noticing some volume. I wish I could get the prints for you for options oddities, but I'm seeing larger blocks at the 460 calls and stuff for the end of the year in SPY. So, again, we have government dysfunction. And the last thing I'll add is, keep an eye on the treasuries, because it's possible that the Chinese need to sell some bonds to pay for some of the dollar-denominated defaults that could be coming their way in the property market. So, you could see a little bit of a freight train there. But thankfully, the Chinese have trillions of dollars of bonds, so I'm sure they're going to be able to weather the storm. But that doesn't mean that, treasuries are going to get smashed a little bit in the meantime. So keep an eye on that for all those that are interested or follow that. And that's about all I got for you right now.
And Mr. Rock Lobster, if folks are intrigued, they want to check out your various newsletter and your legion of products over there in the land of the pit. Where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, go to optionpit.com memberships. If you listen to this show and you like listening to me blather, send me a note, Andrew@optionpit.com, and I will point you to Ted, and we will give you VIX Made Easy or VXX Made Easy, $200 or $400 value for nothing, for giving Ted a call. So I'm going to let him know. So if you listen to this show and you want to learn how the Vol products work and what generates them, generates the bucks in them, and how the futures work and all that good stuff, I did a series on that. It's our most popular seller. But since you listen to this show and I like Longo and I like TOSAW, you can have a freebie if you call Ted. So that's it's 888-TRADE-01, 888-TRADE-01 to take advantage. And maybe I'm learning how to be a bit of a used car salesman, but what the heck.
Hey, you have to say that, though. You have to say, I enjoy hearing Andrew blather on. And then you get the
It's
freebie.
very important.
That's the key phrase. You have to say that. Right? You enjoy his blather.
I enjoy the blather.
You too can get that freebie. Over there in the land of the pit, speaking of weirdness, looking right now, bunch of tweets coming through. People are saying they saw Bitcoin drop to 8,200 on Binance US today. So hopefully that's one of you out there. You got that scoop, listeners. Why pay $66,000 when you could pay $8,000 for the same thing? So interesting. Got a feeling maybe some of those. Coach, how do you bust them in that world? That's interesting. Conversation for another day. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, did you get some of that 8,200 Bitcoin? A, and B, if folks want to call you up to debate Bitcoin, maybe they like to hear you blather on. Where should they go? What should they do?
I love blathering on about a lot of things, but if you're interested in working with a financial advisor who likes to use the option product, if it's deemed appropriate, of course, feel free to check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, or follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW.
There you go. Hit the man up. Give him a follow on the old Twitters. I have it on good authority that good stuff's coming on that Twitter account sometime soon. So keep an eye on him. Give him a follow at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW. All one word on the old Twitters. We got to get the heck out of here. But as the Rock Lobster was saying, we're going to come up TWIFO in a little bit with the once and future Dr. Bix. Last time we found some interesting, perhaps skullduggery going up in some very far out of the money puts in the E-mini. Maybe we'll find something similar today when we run the reports. Who knows? Got to tune into TWIFO to find out. That's in exactly 25 minutes now. We're running long over here. If you're listening live in the Secret Club, we'll pump some fun stuff in there. We'll be back pretty soon with the once and future Dr. Bix. Then back again tomorrow, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's vol season and it's earnings season. So we got the Oracle of New Hampshire joining us for his regular kickoff of the earnings season appearance to break down all the hot action in the world of earnings volatility. You don't want to miss that. Then back again at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, to break down the skullduggery in the world of options oddities. So a lot to look forward to, including TWIFO coming up next. We'll see you then.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.